Melanie. I just talked a little bit about you before you got on, that you've had an exciting year with forming the school board, and you've had 30 years experience as an educator and a teacher and administrator in First Nation schools, and you have a master's of education. And when you're not dedicating your life to work with youth, you're enjoying beading. I've got one daughter that's been crazy about doing beading for the last couple of years. I think the COVID contributed to that, but she's become this wonderful beater. Picking berries. I remember my grandmother going out picking berries and coming back to the house, and she would say, "Oh, I saw a bear." You know, she was, and then she'd say, "You got to pick berries, or the berries will disappear." And so you gather medicines and enjoy the wilderness. Stace was just talking about the beauty of being on the land. So I'll just turn it over to you. Welcome.
Merci, Simon. And thank you. My apologies for a little bit of delay in getting on. It's actually 8 o'clock in the morning here in the Yukon. We're about 3 hours behind you. And I think my dogs were on a different schedule than me. And then when we got to the office, they said to do a little capture and recapture because they bolted to go chase a fox. So it's been a start of a day. With the lovely snowfall, we have definitely entered into winter in the Yukon, so which is really great. So I just want to thank everyone for, I can see there's some on and there'll probably be more jumping on, for coming to listen to our story. I debated very much in this. I think I have umpteen PowerPoints of our process. And in talking with some of our knowledge keepers that we work with every day, one of the growth tasks that they have for myself right now is to do things our way, in which is we have to tell the story to create the picture in our mind, which is how we traditionally passed our knowledge down. So the past 6 or 7 months now, I've had to do a multitude of presentations, and I do my best to try and create that picture of our story and or whatever I'm talking about. So with that, I would also lay out the platform that I'm one of those people that I always enjoy going to conferences, but I know when there's someone telling me about, you know, inspirational things or you're learning from them, I have all the questions and I'm not very good at just like saving it till the end. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free. It will be it will not be determined as rude to me. Just interrupt me and ask the question. I think that's the best way. So my name is Melanie Bennett. I'm Pitawanakwat. I'm from Dawson City. I'm Wolf. I was born and raised in the Yukon. For those of you that don't know where Dawson City is, most know it as the place where the gold rush occurred. For us, that's a different event. That is an event that interrupted our way quite significantly as Pitawanakwat people. I have been an educator all of my life, and I had the pleasure of being the executive director to the Yukon First Nations Education Directorate. I have worked in First Nations schools, and I have also worked in public schools, both in BC and Yukon. I can't say First Nation schools in Yukon yet, so I'm just going to say it at that. We had a different story in education. And this organization was formed under a resolution in 2018 from the Yukon Chiefs Committee on Education. And our mandate is to be the technical body to implement second level services for Yukon First Nations across the territory with a wraparound service model, as well as to negotiate a draft framework agreement. And we have just recently completed the phase 1 of that framework agreement. And we put the word draft in front of it at the direction of our leaders and our knowledge keepers. They said it will always evolve and it will always change. So we will never take that word draft off of it, especially when you're having to work with different governments. Things have to change and we have to be flexible all the time. So really in that phase 1 process, our story started many, many years ago. In 1960, when most jurisdictions were being transferred back First Nations education to them. This is during, we all know about residential school, and as that process evolved and the jurisdiction was being given back to First Nations by the Canadian government. In Yukon, they did an interesting thing, and it was in the territories. Instead of transferring it to the First Nations, they transferred it to the territorial government through what's known as the Master Tuition Agreement. The last copy of that was in 1964. Along that way, in 1973, a group of 12 First Nations from the Yukon leaders took a statement of grievances known as Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow to Ottawa, and they delivered it to the Prime Minister of the day, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. When they delivered that document set the stage for our self-governing process, and 11 of the 14 First Nations in the Yukon now operate under a self-governing agreement, each of their self-governing agreements. The start of that process is known in our region as the Umbrella Final Agreement. And then each First Nation then negotiated their own self-governing agreement using that Umbrella Final Agreement as the guidelines for it. There are still 3 First Nations in the Yukon that have not entered into a self-governing agreement. So we had a really different platform. And the interesting piece in it is that 2/3 of that document, Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow, was written on education and how the status of education for our Indigenous students in the territory was not effective. And since then, we've done a timeline from 1960 on to just show that there has been more than 150 different types of reports, studies, have a look at this, what's the problem, see if we can figure it out, yet no change had happened. So in 2012, after the last one of the Auditor General's reports of 2009, the First Nations said, we can't continue to do this. And so they restruck what was known as the First Nations Education Commission and brought them together and said, we need to show government strongly how we do it in our way. And their way of doing that was with a joint education action plan, which wound up being a tripartite agreement between the government of Canada, the government of Yukon, and all 14 First Nations signed it. And they took that blueprint and said, this is what we need to bring the change. The challenge with it was that government only gave dollars to it for meetings. There was nothing given for implementation. So then you fast forward to 2016 and nothing was moving and a new government came in. So the leadership sat and said, we need to restrike the Chiefs Committee, or well, before that, I better go, was we need to ask the question of the community. So a 2-year process of education visioning occurred across the territory. And I had the pleasure of doing the full process with that, where we brought regions from across Canada, Mi'kmaq, Kinamatway, the Anishinaabeg, First Nations Education Steering Committee, and then out of BC. And then one of the successors here was CSFY, which is the Commission de Scolaire de Francophone Association. So it's the French first language. And they had a school board here in Yukon. After that visioning session, we had proposed 7 options that we could look at. Some of them were to continue on with the status quo. Some was to each of the First Nations draw down, and there were advantages and disadvantages for them drawing down. We know right now in their self-governing process, some of them are more than 20 years into it, and they still have not fully drawn down the programs and service transfer agreements that they have entered into. So they knew that road would be a long road. At the end of it, we had all of the First Nations in the room, and they had decided to follow the draft framework agreement process. And their rationale of why they did that was that it used existing legislation under the Yukon Education Act, and it would provide an interim step as they develop what it would be like for them to have their own schools in their own traditional territories. It was one of our knowledge keepers who stood up in the room and said, do we know what education is for us right now? Because most of us in this room have gone through residential school, and that's what we know. We have to relearn that. So doing the school board agreement was the opportunity to provide the learning process to that, and also provide the ability to have more authority and control and jurisdiction of education. And then the other factor of it was time. They did not want to see, another 20 years pass. They knew that if with the school board agreement, they could get that implemented within a couple of years, and then start that second phase of the framework agreement process, which was negotiate their own regional education agreement with full jurisdiction occurring. We were tasked at that time, then when that became a decision, one chief stood up and stilled the room by saying, if we're going to do this, we need to reestablish the Chiefs Committee on Education in Yukon. And so they reestablished that. And that was probably a pivotal moment, because the first resolution that they passed was to form this organization. One of the things that was brought up was that there had been many attempts to try and do this, but it was always laid out as, well, the First Nations will do it. None of them could meet the capacity or the needs of that. It would just stretch their own capacity even further. So they passed the resolution to start this organization, and then it would be this organization that would lead the process of negotiating the school board agreement, implementing it, and then again, those second level services. So in December of 2019, it was March of 2018 when that resolution by the CCOE was passed. And then in December of 2019, the organization was formally started. And we actually moved into our space in July of 2020. I find that to be a little bit miraculous myself, because we did it, and it was 4 people, really busting it out and working really hard together during a pandemic. So it was very challenging, but we managed to establish the organization. And the first thing that we had to work with was to negotiate the framework or the school board agreement. It was in June of 2020 that the agreement was signed by Yukon government. It's a collaborative agreement with Yukon government using the existing legislation to form a school board that would be 5 trustees. But it was very specific because there were some things within the agreement that gave it a specificity of more authority and control for the First Nations. One being the aspect that all decision-making would have to come from the Chiefs Committee on Education level, as well as the school board trustees level, and then the Yukon territorial government. A referendum was then run, and 8 schools out of the 29 schools in Yukon successfully had resolutions and referendum process that passed, and they would move into the school board agreement starting in the 22-23 school year. So August 18th of this year, the First Nations School Board accepted responsibility of those 8 schools. It's quite an interesting dynamic. There was one region where the referendum was unsuccessful, And there are a few regions that didn't meet the timeline to pass or enter into the referendum and are now following the legislation in the Yukon Education Act to enter into that referendum process for a second time to join in on the 23-24 school year. Those 8 schools are in the most northern. One is in the most northern part of the Yukon. The other is in the most westerly, and another in the most easterly, and another in the most southern. So we covered the 4 corners of the Yukon, which I think was great. And then a couple of schools which were a surprise in the urban area. Right now, we are at the process that with a successful referendum, we added or put in place an interim governance committee to get things started. And the trustee elections are occurring. Today is actually the last day for folks to put their nominations forward for 5 trustees. And I just looked at a Yukon elections website last night, and we have 6 who have put their names forward. Usually the last days, a few more will come in. So I'm very happy that there will actually be an election. You can compare that to the Francophone. They only have 5 in, and they will probably all be acclaimed, which is going to be an interesting thing. Very excited about all of that work. What does that look for us now? We are working as the organization YFNED to support the school board in any way, shape, or possible for second level services in the for the Indigenous students. But for the board schools, our board is the Chiefs Committee on Education for the directorate that I serve. And they have mandated us to fully support all of the First Nations school board schools in any way. The other thing that really was brought out by the chiefs in this is that doing it in this way, it wasn't just a factor of time, but it was also an opportunity to really bring forth and set the model of what truth and reconciliation could be like. And I can say in the initial stages right now, the conversations, the learning, the teaching that has had to happen with educators that are in those 8 schools that are of First Nations ancestry and some are of not, has been a steep learning curve. And the platform that we have right now, that if you're part of this school, you must do this, has allowed us to say, take the risk. It is time. There is no longer time for excuses. You need to take the risk. We can't say, well, I'm not the First Nations expert. You're actually working in a First Nations school board school. So it's expected that we all become experts. And we know that that takes time and learning. So the support going to that right now is a really heavy model of professional development and a mindset that change doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't matter what it is. You need to have a clear timeline, and you need to allow those that are entering into that change the knowledge that they have a safe space and that they can make mistakes. It's okay. And we're going to help them. That's part of it. They're all good mistakes. So I think we've been setting that. We're looking forward to our trustee elections that the final day of voting will be November 7th. And then the interim governance committee will hand over the feather and allow those trustees to then work to implement all of the policies, which was an intense amount of work to get done, that are based in our way. They're in our Indigenous pedagogy and philosophy, and provide the platform that there's one school right now that is laying out that the students will actually only be in a building, as they call it, classroom style, for half of the school year. The other half of the school year, they will be out on the land where we learn the best, and bringing those, changing the model of student outcomes and what would be an achievable student outcome for them that would meet the on the land learning that occurs for us. So that's part of my work as well, is to get, I don't like using this word, but it's the colonial word of curriculum, For us, it's all about how we do it our way and our learning and bringing that together. They are adopting the same philosophy that we have at YFNED, that all of our learning, all of our work that we do has to be bookended by two things. One, our knowledge keepers, and our knowledge keepers who guide us on, how we do things, help us with the mucky parts of, how do we work with the challenges. And then the most important thing to me, which I think often gets forgotten in education, and it's our youth. I was actually in a meeting during the visioning session, and we had one of our young men who was about to graduate, and he knew that he didn't have all of the credentials to enter into post-secondary. He was getting an adult dogwood. And he just said, I don't want to learn those things in school. I need this so that I can move on and better myself in my career as I step off into the world. But he said, those are things that I never wanted to learn. And it really made me think about how we do many, many things in education, but we forget to ask the students and the children if this is what will engage them, if this is how they see it as positive learning. So we bookend it with making sure that there is a youth voice in all of our decision making. And the front end of the policy for all of the First Nations School Board is that everything, all their decisions will be made with the students in the center of it all. Even down to their organizational chart that they've developed for how they will work, the students are in the center. It is more connected to our way than it is. It's not a hierarchical process, which is very different learning for all in this world, I'd say. So I think that puts me at about, I have 5 minutes left, and I hope that I have put the picture in your head that you need to know that I have folks right now sitting and looking and going, okay, you're doing it. By folks, I mean both knowledge keepers and youth here. And I want to thank them for that. But if you have any questions, I'm just going to do the Zoom pause now to say, fire away.
Any questions? You can also get on your website and get your newsletter, which is quite informative. It's really exciting.
Actually, there's two. One is for our organization, which is yfned.ca. Please do check us out. And then also check out the new school board's website, which is fnsb.ca. And there you will see the organizational chart that I talked to. It's very different and unique to how we do the work, and it has challenged us all to make sure that we're making those decisions for our students in the best way.
So we got Polly Lalott.
Hi, so congratulations. That's really a historic journey that you're on, and I know it's early days, and wishing you the best of luck going forward. I'm with Elections Canada, and I have one of my colleagues here, we're really looking at kind of developing partnerships of how to inspire youth to take on different roles in civic society type thing, to become maybe future leaders, to become, maybe a candidate in different levels of government elections, those kinds of things, maybe down the road. Is there, they've developed a number of tools and curriculum, interactive, and Catherine spoke to some a bit earlier. Is there an opportunity for us to maybe co-collaborate on and co-design and co-develop some of these tools with, and what's the protocol to even approach?
I would just I would email me, and then I can help with that. We do work a lot. I can tell you right now my big challenge is working with the First Nations, because an election process is not our way, and it's very difficult. to bring our First Nations to go through that voting process, and educating them is the most important piece. So if you just email me, my email address is melanie.bennett, and Bennett is with 2 N's and 2 T's at yfned.ca. And I'll do my best to answer questions on that. I can tell you I'm neck deep in the elections process right now and working with our knowledge keepers and our youth. And one thing we did develop here was our junior advocate and our mini junior advocate program, which has worked very successfully in the schools. And I'm quite proud of the fact that that was a fallout from COVID, but it showed one of the things that could be really successful, and it's been really beneficial for our youth. So on a daily basis in my office, I have probably 15 youth that come through here every day. They're doing a variety of work. Our only agreement we have is that if they are going to work with us, they must maintain school. I can tell you right now, I have 4 of them working with my analyst teams, that they're helping them get their applications together for post-secondary education. It's about pulling them in, and we're trying to set that model as well for the school board schools. And those junior advocates work in the schools as tutors, helping students and facilitate them as well to finding their path. So just contact me.
So we have time for one more question, Dr. Tremblay.
Maybe
Thank
just
you.
a quick follow-up comment though, just before. I think there's some great opportunities here, like how to help youth, how to participate in a committee, how to participate in government, how to become a negotiator, because how to implement your treaty in essence. Thank you.
Thank you
Now,
very much.
Melanie,
Yes.
congratulations. Bravo. You rock. You're doing good work, and you're listening. And that's the key to success.
Yep.
Having ongoing, consistent relationships with the youth and your knowledge keepers. You have to have those conversations daily to keep everybody on board and moving and connected. It's about the connectedness, and it's the connected to our ways of knowing. And it's hard to do. We have to replace what they know with something else, and you have to model that behavior. And Melanie, I think that you have been an amazing leader in making that happen. So I want to hold you up for that, because it's hard work. It's hard work, and we'll make. And I think you're right. We have to make time, but we have to do it again in our way. And we're finding the path. There's no easy solution that's written down for us. And you're developing it each day. So I would ask, when external people from outside come in and ask, know that this is ongoing. And you get the best answer you get for today. Tomorrow, it might be different. And because you will evolve. So now Goa, Melanie.
Thank you. And I just put the wrong email address in the chat screen. My name is only spelled with 1 E.
Oh my God.
Let me do it. And Paulette, I truly do appreciate that. I think I get up every day and I go, I think I've earned these bags under my eyes, and I'm starting to call them suitcases. So, and it's okay. It's all good. It's for the most important thing, I think, which is it's for our kids.
Okay, well, thank you, Melanie. It's a really interesting story, and we should all keep track of your successes and challenges, so we can all learn about First Nations control of education.
Thank you very much, Mussy.
Okay, thank you. So our next speaker is Jacob Pitawanakwat. I hope I got it right, Jacob. And he's going to be talking about supporting First Nations literacy through storybooks. And he's the literacy interventionist program manager for Innovations for Learning Canada. Jacob.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Alrighty. Well, hello everyone. I am so pleased to have the opportunity to come and speak at this national gathering here today. I just want to start by introducing myself. My name is Jacob Pitawanakwat. I am calling in from Manitoulin Island in Ontario, and I am the program manager with Innovations for Learning here in Canada. I was actually the very first early literacy interventionist to be hired by the team when they came to Canada. We've had a few years of very rapid expansion, and now I no longer have the time to be an early literacy interventionist. My management duties are taking up all of that. I wanted to talk today about not only my journey, but the journey of my organization, as well as our partners and stakeholders as we brought our program into Canada over the past couple of years, and many of the adaptations that we've made to our approach to literacy and our approach to our programming, which had some really interesting and exciting outcomes. I'll start by giving everyone an overview of who we are and what we're even doing here. And then I'll get into these actual storybook series and the creation of that and some of the outcomes it's had. We've actually only piloted it for the first time last year, and we've had some really interesting feedback. So I'll get into the details about all of that. But first, Innovations for Learning. So the organization itself was actually founded 29 years ago in Chicago. It was a US educational tech nonprofit whose mission was to create software, to create custom software to address early literacy challenges in communities. In 2018, the organization was given the opportunity to come to Canada, and our first partner was actually the Yukon Board of Education here on Manitoulin Island, which is where I sort of slotted into the picture. The Toronto District School Board was very short to follow up as a list of our partners in our early years. The mission of the organization, which is a registered Canadian charity, is to fight long-term poverty and challenges by offering solutions to reduce the early grade literacy gap. I don't think I need to go into too much detail about the early grade literacy gap with the audience we have here today, but suffice it to say that students who aren't reading at grade level by the end of third grade are 4 times less likely to graduate high school statistically. So what we've done as an organization is we are pooling as many resources as we can to laser focus our efforts and our support and utilizing technology to address that gap when it is the smallest, therefore giving the students the best chance moving forward later into education, putting them on the best trajectory for their education journey, as well as their journey through life. As I mentioned, we started with the Yukon Board of Education. Very quickly, we've expanded basically to all 4 corners of Ontario. We were able to expand to some northern flying communities. For those of you who were on the conference last year, we were talking about some of the innovations that me and my team had implemented to do remote conferencing, as opposed to using Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Classroom or anything like that. We found a very lightweight approach to support classrooms remotely. So that way, internet infrastructure and tech requirements were very low, the big one being internet bandwidth. And with that, we've been able to implement some really cool implementations with some of our northern communities. And we're outside of Ontario now. In the last couple of years, we were able to get partnerships with schools out in BC on Vancouver Island, in the Yukon, as well as in Edmonton and Saskatchewan, and we're continuing to grow. To date, our growth has just basically been on principal to principal referral, saying, hey, you guys got to try out this neat little program. And that's how we've expanded thus far. The way we're supporting schools is we're implementing 2 programs, and they're all falling under this umbrella that we call TutorMate. The first of the program is high impact tutoring. In high impact tutoring, it's a proven and equitable approach to address learning loss and of course accelerate learning. This slide here I've actually stolen from Brown University, their National Student Accelerator program. They're doing a lot of research on different tutoring programs, in particular high impact tutoring and the effectiveness of it. The way it sort of works is we're providing students with an online tool or a digital learning application that has the instruction, the ability to assess students on where they are and provide independent reinforcement on the specific contents or specific skills that that student needs support with. But what we're doing is, instead of just leaving it at a pretty cool little internet program, we're introducing a paraprofessional, a facilitator of an online program who's actually coming into the school and working with the kids for 5 minutes a day on the online program, using our custom software to help them work through the reading foundation. So these people are seeing the students 3 to 5 times a week at a very high frequency, constantly pushing that needle further and further forward to again help support the student the best they can. And of course, the independent practice stations are able to recognize exactly what that facilitator, that early leadership intervention, is a tutor, so to say, is working on, and provide content that matches that student's needs. As I mentioned, a lot of research and universities are going nuts with this concept stateside. There's been a lot of research in the US. I'm sure many of you have heard about this before. The American Rescue Plan has allocated $122 billion over a 3-year period to support elementary and secondary school emergency relief. It's called the ESSER Fund. What's interesting about this fund is that we're finding that nearly 2/3 of states are leveraging this funding to expand their tutoring programs. So a lot of the schools, especially stateside, are really doubling down on this concept of tutoring. And we know from the research in the National Student Accelerator, we also have a bit of an in because we have a program over in the States, that high impact tutoring seems to be the tutoring of choice for the schools that are expanding these tutoring programs. We are able to see, stateside, they're signing multi-million-dollar partnerships where they're hiring hundreds of people to go and support a very large school district. But stateside, this is something that's really picking up a lot of steam and being implemented on a very large scale. And of course, with all of this momentum that we're seeing in the US, we were able to do some formalized studies on our implementation of high impact tutoring. And we were able to, the Center of Research and Reform at Johns Hopkins University did a randomized control trial on our program, part of the Every Student Succeed Act, which looks at equitable solutions for students. And we received the highest rating of strong, which is it's like a rating 1. It's the highest rating they give out, and we got that. So we're really happy to kind of have that additional evidence that our program is working in an equitable way. In Canada, we see very similar results as to what the research is showing, as well as what our partners in the US are seeing. This is an example data from a school that we worked with last year. And I just wanted to sort of take a look at the data just to show you where this tutoring is having impacts with the students. So as you can see by the 2 bars on the left, this is a grade 1 class that we didn't work with. We were comparing this to the class that we were going to be working with in the current year. And we saw that 0% of the students actually had a full understanding of the letter names. We call this Reading Foundation Stage 1. So none of the students in the comparative class actually knew all the letters of the alphabet. In the class that we were working with in September, when we did an initial assessment with the students, we found that all of the students were either at Reading Foundation Stage 1, is what we call it, Reading Foundation Stage 2. So all the students were either still working on the names of the letters or the consonant sounds. None of the students had both of those things put together. By June of 2022, so by the end of the school year, we had 80% of the students at what we call Reading Foundation Stage 4 and above. What's significant about Reading Foundation Stage 4 is that's where we actually introduce decodable text. I should also mention this is an SK cohort that we're looking at with these 2 bars right here. And again, we had 80% of them reading at Stage 4, which is our SK grade level reading target for those students. So we had students who went from no one in the class knowing all the letters or consonant sounds to 80% of the class reading decodable text at grade level or above. So we're really excited to see the data there. We've even had some kids go above and beyond that, and some of them even mastered the reading foundation, so they're working on oral reading fluency. All this to say is we're seeing that students tend to have some small holes in their reading foundation, and having that person, that tutor, come in and spend some one-on-one time with them is really all the student needs to really push them through to that next level, and they can really start accelerating on their own. So that's our high impact tutoring program. In parallel to this, we utilize enrichment tutors or virtual volunteers. And what's exciting about this is, well, we use private sector sponsorships and funding to subsidize the cost, so that way the school doesn't have to pay full price for a tutoring service like this. And because this corporations are already involved, they then utilize their employees to act as virtual volunteers. And a good way to think about this is like pen pals, but way cooler with custom software. The tutors call in once a week and do a 30-minute reading session with each of the students, where they're working on things like comprehension and fluency, but they're also working together on kindling a love for reading and a joy for education. And it's that personal relationship that really helps the students succeed in the school environment. I'm just going to jump through these other slides here really quickly. We've got a custom software that takes care of all the logistics on everything, so the teacher doesn't have a lot of upfront effort to do. The tutors are given a reading level to work with the student, and then they start working together. The tutor has a much more complicated view than the student does. The student just gets things pop up on their screen, and the tutor's talking them through, trying to figure out, hey, what's that word? Or let's read this story together. So that's a little bit about how that works. We have some very well reputable organizations helping both fund this program to be received in schools, so that way schools can get it at a subsidized rate, as well as providing those virtual volunteers. This year, last year, we had around just under 250 virtual volunteers, which equated to just under 3,000 reading sessions and just under 1,000 hours of reading support for our students in partnered schools. So what's really interesting about this entire scenario, especially with the virtual volunteers, is there are many instances where the tutors are signing up to teach a student how to read, but there's many opportunities where the student begins to teach the tutor. From a tutor testimonial from Audrey here, we can kind of see how that relationship forms. So she said, not only did I see an improvement in Sarah's reading skills, but these sessions allowed me to see the world through the eyes of a child again. So we can really see how Audrey's being affected by her time working with her student Star. So what I've given you is a basically overview of that program that we're sort of seeing that we've adopted from the US. And as I mentioned, we came to Canada in 2018, and we've been very busy making a lot of changes. So this is sort of where I entered into the picture and started working with the students at the Yukon Junior School, and then later moved into a program manager role. As I was transitioning into a program manager, I had a conversation with the language lead at the Yukon Board of Education. And she shared that there are some very interesting opportunities from the way our program is set up for us to support language revitalization and to serve reconciliation within the education space. So what she did is she connected me with the Assembly of First Nations, where I ended up sitting in on the Spirit Speakers conference, Our Languages, Our Futures. And this is where representative youth from across Canada sat together and put together some recommendations on what the youth want to see from the perspective of language revitalization and reconciliation in the community. And in sitting through this conference, I saw this recurring theme of instilling pride. Many of the youth felt like that their language wasn't recognized on a national, their languages weren't recognized on a national scale. A lot of them spoke about how they felt hesitant to learn or speak the language, or they may have even felt that it's more important to learn a language like French than it is to learn their community's language. So I looked at our programming and thought, what can we do to instill more pride into the language and really bring some more awareness to the languages and our cultures on a national scale? So I brought these questions back to the education boards that we were working with at the time. And we ended up collectively deciding that our best way forward at this stage would be to co-create our own series of children's storybooks. So we did exactly that. We made 14 storybooks. They were all on the platform last year. And each of the stories not only explored the rich cultures and traditions of the communities that we co-created them with, but they also served as a tool to support the school's efforts in language revitalization. So as you can see, as we have a tutor and a student working through these stories together, we were able to sprinkle some words in the community's language into the stories. And as a tutor and a student are reading through them together, every now and then they're going to come across these words. And while the tutor, well, in most cases, will have never seen that word before, and the student, well, they're still learning how to read, so they're not going to know what that word is either. So it's really going to be up for the tutor and the student to work together to serve language revitalization and to serve reconciliation. There'll be many instances where the student might have a personal or a traditional connection to a theme in the story, or even a word that appears in the story. And this is not only going to give them the opportunity to feel grounded in that within the education space, but it's going to give them the opportunity to share that and really be a leader and share that within a safe environment with someone who's invested in them and in their community. Of course, we recognize we're going to have a lot of people reading these stories that don't have a lot of experience with First Nation languages. So what we've done is we're working with the language departments at the school to have elders come in and speak or record themselves speaking the words that appear. So that way, when you're in the platform, you can click on a little button and hear an elder speak that word. So that way you have the proper pronunciation and the proper phonetics when you go and try and say that word for the first time. And it's a little bit less of a daunting task when you have that additional resource available for you. And because these are ebooks, it's very easy to slide that in. So really excited to see, as this evolves and as this rolls out, some of the outcomes that will come by creating these opportunities within the education space. And in piloting this year and having these stories live in the platform, we were ambitious. We were excited to see the outcomes that we would have, but even we were left surprised with the level of engagement that these stories got and some of the feedback that we've heard. I got a tutor testimonial from Jeremy Rawlings here, who's also with HarperCollins, and he said he worked with a student named Audrina. He said, Audrina usually has comments about what we are reading and often shares with me aspects of her language and culture that are prompted by the stories. I feel that I benefit as much from my half an hour a week with TutorMate as my students do. I come off these calls feeling upbeat and refreshed and ready to tackle my work again. And when I read this testimonial, I got really excited because in this, we see Audrina stepping up and really being a leader and sharing information about her language and her culture. And that sort of ties into sort of, that the sharing that's so prevalent in our culture, those oral storytellings and things that have been passed down through generations. And now Audrina is using this space as an opportunity to engage in that and to push reconciliation forward with her tutor and passing that knowledge along. And I'm hopeful that as Audrina grows, she'll learn from this experience and move forward with her life with more confidence and in understanding that this knowledge and the language that she has is something that's extremely valuable. And it's easy to think that these experiences are just going to be isolated to these cute conversations between the tutor and the student, and no real large-scale change is going to happen. But to our surprise, when the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation was announced, we had the Directorate of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion with SimCorps reach out to us. And she's been tutoring her student for the past couple of years. And she said, I don't want this to be another day where everyone just gets a day off. I want my employees to have the opportunity to make the best use of this day. And she asked us, what can we do? How will it be perceived? And how could we be courageous in this space and push reconciliation forward? So we brought these questions to community. And what we ended up did is hosting a webinar with the former Ogama Duke Pelche. We had Shanna Pelche, who's a PhD student from the community who does research on youth mental health, as well as Sandra Pelche, who is the language lead at the Yukon Board of Education. And they came on and they talked to the employees of SimCorps. They opened this webinar company-wide. We had just under 200 people. It was 170, I believe, employees hop on this call to learn directly from the community. And it was a really amazing turnout, and it really had a strong impact on the folks that work within SimCorps. So we were really excited to see that, and it didn't stop there. When we finished the story that I shared with you today, Ice Fishing with Dimki, SimCorps happened to be the company that sponsored the development of this book. Again, we don't want the community and the schools to have to pay for this. We used the private sector donations to make this possible. And when they saw this book, they were so proud of the story. They were so proud of their relationship and the work that they've done within the community that they printed over 600 copies of the story. They developed a PDF version that would be able to be printed onto a storybook, and they donated it to the school. So every student got to go home with a physical copy of the Ice Fishing with Nimki story. And it didn't stop there. SimCorps had some extra books printed so that they can share it within their networks and share it with their other corporate partners on a national scale. And they're sharing their experience working in partnership with the Yukon Board of Education through TutorMate, and sharing what they were able to create in collaboration with the community, which again is really giving the community an opportunity and a pedestal to share their voice and to share their values on a national scale. So we're really excited to see how well received these storybooks have been. If you want to check out the book yourself, I left 2 QR codes up here. The one on, I guess it would be your right, it's my left. You can download the book so you can see that PDF copy that SimCorps made. If you open that in Adobe Acrobat, you can actually click on the words that appear in the story and hear the audio recordings. And if you want to learn more about the Storybook project or learn how to get involved with it, there's a QR code that leads you to a little landing page on the website about the Storybook. The process is really just getting in touch with myself. We have a very small team. So if you find it easier, feel free to email me at jacob@tutormate.ca if you have any questions or if you want to be involved. And if you don't want to be involved, but you have some insight or some knowledge on which direction we can take this project to make it better suitable for our students, or if there are any unique opportunities that I might not be aware of, I am absolutely all ears. I've been trying to make this a very collaborative project. And I know we have a lot of knowledge and wisdom at this national gathering here today. So if there are any of you who have any recommendations or thoughts on the direction that we can take a project like this to further its impact, I am absolutely all ears. Please feel free to reach out to me with your thoughts. So I'll leave it at that. I think we have about 5 minutes left for questions, but I just want to say Chi Miigwech for giving me this opportunity to share this initiative and my journey. And I am so excited to keep the conversation going. Thanks.
Chi Miigwech, Jacob, that is really exciting. From last year, you've really grown, and there's tremendous work that's been done. You should be proud of yourself. I think Dr. Tremblay has something to say.
Wow, is what I have to say. That's just dynamite. Everything you said, Jacob, resonated with me. You definitely are a mover and shaker for your community, your students, and your people. I think the storybooks are magnificent. I look at them and they have such high quality, and that you were able to convince the funders to help you give each child a book, to own it, to have it, to share it, to take it home and talk to parents about it, talk to their grannies about it, talk to their, aunties about it. How wonderful I would feel, and how proud I would be to be belong to your First Nations. And I truly, truly support what you do. And so maybe we can find a way to do something together with FNEAA beyond what we're doing now, because I think that you know what to do. You've got the energy, you have all of this knowledge and skill that you bring forward, and your gifts, and you so willingly share them. And I am sure there are other schools who would like to have these storybooks for sure in this network. So, Yahweh, thank you. I hold you up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. We have time for one more short question because we're going to shift over to our closing. So Jacob, how do we keep track of your activities? Just go on your website. Do you have like a email system that we could?
Yeah, for sure. My email is jacob@tutormate.ca. You can always reach out to me that way. Our website's innovationforlearning.org. If you type in tutormate.ca, it'll bring you to the same place. We don't have a slick marketing team, so it's very hard to keep up with what we've been doing. Our team's about 3 folks deep in terms of full-time staff. But yeah, we're out there. And I think the best way at this stage to keep in touch would be to give me an email and we can connect and keep the conversation going.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to all go over to the closing ceremony, and thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Melanie, for very inspiring stories. Thank you. Miigwech.